as I said, we're extremely pleased this morning to have such a distinguished speaker and a man who needs no introduction that will be joining the podium to give us a brief background into Governor Parkinson's history with the university, Dr. Don Beggs.
We're here to hear the governor, but I do want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to indicate to you that in my 12 years here, last night was the first time the governor brought us a victory when the governor was present at a Shocker game. And as he and I were talking at the beginning of the second half, I didn't know whether he was going to be able to stay or not. But a week ago Monday evening was the State of the State address. And for presidents of the universities, we were all invited to be a part of the gallery. And I thought that was very special in my 12 years. But in talking to Ed Hammond, he indicated to me in his 23 years as president, we've never been invited to the gallery for the State of the State address. And I think that's part of a reflection of our graduates' understanding of higher ed and our role in economic development and our role in the future of this state. And so it is my privilege to introduce a person, a Wichitan. Last night, the memory ways in which we talked, living in the trailer, all the other stories that we talked about. But it's my privilege to introduce the Honorable Mark Parkinson, Governor of the State of Kansas.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are so many nice things about being governor, and you have special moments that I just want to savor those, and so this is one of them. It's great to be back on the campus. I want to start out and make sure that I don't forget this and acknowledge the remarkable leadership of President Beggs and the great job that Shirley is doing in representing the university, and thank you so much for what you all are doing. I did grow up in Wichita, and in fact, I'll explain here in a few moments, in some ways almost grew up on this campus because our house after I was 10 years old was so close to here. And so to live in this city and then have the opportunity to stay in the state and come back as governor is a very special time to spend the night with the president and Shirley in their beautiful home and stay up probably a little later than we should have. So it's a very special couple of days for me. I'm going to talk this morning about my experience here at Wichita State. I want these Heights students to listen to this as they think about what they're going to do. And I'm going to talk about how great I think the future of Wichita State can be. I had a great experience at Wichita State. I had a great experience in Wichita. And at Wichita State, I really learned how to think, how to write. It was a major skill that I learned here, and how to speak. Now, I wasn't completely hopeless coming out of high school. I had gone to Heights, but I was very one-dimensional. I spent all my time on the debate team. And my philosophy was that if I wasn't working on debate, I was wasting my time. So I only worked on other classes enough to stay eligible for debate. I'm serious. That's how focused our team was. And I'm going to tell you something about myself after the end of telling you about my experience that's really going to reveal that in a very embarrassing way. But I had a great experience here. In English composition, I was introduced to the book Elements of Style by E.B. White, and if you're an English professor or a good writer, you know about that book. It opened my eyes to the power of writing, to active voice, to short, simple sentences, the elegance and the beauty that advocacy in the written form can have. In political science, I learned all the things that you learn about in political science, not just how a system operates, but why it operates and what causes it to break down, and all the great things that you learn by majoring in political science. And I learned the single most important lesson that I learned at Wichita State. I had a professor named John Millett, and Professor Millett came to class one day and he drew a big line across the board. We had a chalkboard back then, all the way across the board. And on one side he wrote, dictatorship. On the other side, he wrote anarchy. And what he said was quite profound. He said, if you take the two extreme forms of government, on one end you have dictatorship, and on the other hand you have anarchy. Where do the Republicans and the Democrats fit on this long line? And the answer was that they fit in the middle, and on a 6-foot line, Republicans and Democrats that live in the United States of America, that believe in democracy, that believe in freedom, that love the country, are only about that far apart. And that has been the most valuable lesson to me, because when we're involved in all of these political debates, where the Republicans think they're absolutely right and they're miles and miles away from where the Democrats are at, and the Democrats think they're absolutely right and they're miles and miles away from the Republicans are at, the perspective that Dr. Millett gave me is we're extremely close. And if you can just understand how close we are on the broad spectrum and can take some time to listen and understand what people are saying, we can work together and we can solve these problems together. And I've used that lesson not only in public service, I've used that lesson in our law practice, where we were able to settle most of our cases because we didn't see the world as a large fight. We saw it as a way for people to come together. And I've used it immensely in business. When people think there are insurmountable problems, they aren't. We are much closer to each other than we think. And I debated. And that really defined my experience at Wichita State. And I have to thank Dr. Radigan for always making sure that the debate budget was fully funded. We have a great history in debate at Wichita State. We won the national championship. I believe it was Eldon and Shields won the national championship. We have a great team this year. We have a great basketball team that I love to follow. We have a great debate team this year that I followed their progress on the internet. I hope to meet the two debaters and the coach relatively soon. And so I had the extraordinary opportunity of being able to travel around the country and represent Wichita State debating and hanging around with Dr. John Shunk, who was a very brilliant person, still lives here in Wichita, and debate with John Carmichael, who's a lawyer here in Wichita, and Brian Hufford, who went on to Yale Law School from Wichita State and is still my good friend, a partner in a big firm in New York City, and we had a blast. Let me talk just briefly about the future of the university. People ask me that, and I think the future is so bright. Dr. Beggs and I have talked about this on a variety of occasions, about the remarkable history that we have and the opportunity that we have before us, but I will tell you that opportunity depends on us. It depends on the decisions that we make and the commitments that we're willing to make to the university. Jim Collins wrote a book called From Good to Great. It's a terrific book. Whether you're in business or any venture, run a nonprofit, any kind of work, I would encourage you to read this book. And what he did was, in a very objective way, he studied what is the difference between good companies and great companies. And they set up this matrix that would make you eligible to become a great company, and it ends up that there aren't that many really, really great companies. But he studied the great companies and tried to figure out what made them different from just the merely good companies. And what he found was that the great companies understood what they were better at than anybody else in the world, what they had a competitive advantage on, and they focused on that. They didn't try to be everything for everybody. And what I think the opportunity is for Wichita State and the direction that Dr. Beggs has us going is that we understand what our inherent strengths are. We understand the areas where no one else can compete with us. And so while we will be very good in almost every academic program we offer, we have opportunities to be great in a few. We have the opportunity to be great in engineering and specifically aeronautical engineering, and that's because we're in Wichita. The incredible advantage of being in the air capital of the world, in being in an industry, commercial aviation, where there are such barriers to competition that more Wichitas aren't just going to suddenly start springing up all over the country. It's just too hard to start a commercial aircraft company. For that reason, our continued focus on engineering and aeronautical engineering is an area where we can be the best in the country. Entrepreneurship. Growing up as a kid in Wichita, you get the bug. And although people think of me as a public servant and a politician, Stacy and I, at our hearts, were really entrepreneurs. When I was a kid, the heroes of this community weren't sports figures. They weren't movie stars. They were the general aviation moguls. They were the Carney brothers. They were people later on like Tom Devlin and the Kochs and all the people that started from nothing and created these great businesses and these great empires. Those were the heroes. That also can't be replicated. You would think, well, surely any city can develop a great commitment to entrepreneurship. No. It involves an intellectual capacity that simply can't be copied. And that's why I think our focus on entrepreneurship makes so much sense. And I want to talk about a third area where we can be great. And again, Dr. Beggs is heading us in just the right direction. We're not there yet. We've got a long way to go. But that's in the area of dental care. The state of Kansas does not have a dental school. It is not a coincidence that when you look at all of the objective measurements of dental care in our state compared to other states, that we often do not do that well. If you don't have a dental school, it's hard to get dentists. We have a tremendous opportunity because of the central location of Wichita State, that if we have a dental school in the state, which we need, it makes so much sense for it to be in Wichita and at Wichita State. Dr. Beggs is leading us in that direction with the great support of Delta Dental in building a graduate dental program. But I would hope that 20 years from now, that the large amount of money that's necessary to create a dental school has come forward, that there are a handful of people in this community that have the ability to underwrite such an effort. And if we do so, it would be great for the future of this university and also great for the state of Kansas. So I see our potential as terrific, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. Unfortunately, it is not free. In order to go from good to great, it takes a lot of things. Some of them involve money and some of them don't. It involves leadership, which we have. It involves good strategic planning, which we have, but it also involves money. We have to have sufficient money to keep our good faculty and attract additional faculty as we grow. We have to have sufficient money to make the capital improvements, to expand the dental program, and all of the other areas that we have great opportunity. Now, it's not very complicated. There aren't that many sources of money. You've got tuition, which is very affordable at Wichita State, but if you continue to raise tuition, eventually you lose your student base. We have the endowment, where Elizabeth King and her team have done a great job at creating a healthy endowment. In the long run, the endowment will be incredibly important. The long-term survivability of any university is going to depend more and more on its endowment than upon aid from state and federal governments. And that is why being great in aeronautical engineering, in entrepreneurship, in dentistry is so important. Because it's hard for an endowment association to raise money if they don't have rich alums. You know, everybody says, why does KU have a $1.2 billion endowment? They have it because they're a great school, and they have a great endowment organization, et cetera, but they also have a medical school and a law school. And I bet Elizabeth wishes she had a medical school and a law school and she could run out and talk to them. But we don't have that, but we have some other things that we're building that can grow our endowment in the future. And we need help from the state legislature. I can't explain it. I think I understand the reason, but in every other community in the state that has a university, a major university, K-State, KU, Hayes, Pittsburgh, Emporia, probably because of the size of those communities, their legislators are committed every session to doing everything they can for that university. They view that as their job. Probably because Wichita is a much larger city and has a lot of other interest, we don't have that same kind of undying loyalty from every member of the Wichita delegation that you would hope for. And I don't mean to be critical of the Wichita legislators. I really don't. It's not the way I think that you should try to get things accomplished. But we need some help in Topeka. We are at a critical point this year where we've had to cut funding so much that I'm concerned that any further cuts will cause a lot of the progress that we've made to fall back. So I'm encouraging you to contact your legislators and say, we love you coming to our events, we love you coming to our basketball games and our plays and our music events, but what we would really love is if you would help us out on our budget, because we're going to need some help from Topeka. I'm going to close with a couple of quotes from Winston Churchill. The first has nothing to do with this speech, but I'm the governor and I get to do this, okay? Winston Churchill was brilliant, smart, witty, quick, all the things that you'd want in a leader. And he saved the free world, along with leadership from the United States during World War II. And he had this huge feud with the very first woman who was a member of Parliament, Lady Astor. She would just bug him anytime she could, and she drove him crazy. They were having tea one afternoon in a castle in the United Kingdom, and she said to him as she poured his tea, "Sir Winston, if I were your wife, I would be tempted to put poison in your tea." Winston Churchill didn't pause a moment. He looked her straight in the eye and said, "Lady Astor, if I were your husband, I would be tempted to drink it." Okay, that has nothing to do with it, but I like it. Here's the one that does. He was asked during the depths of World War II, when he was making all kinds of tough decisions, "Are you worried about how history will treat you?" And he said, "I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried about how history will treat me because I intend to write it." And he did. The same thing is true with this university. We've had a great past. We can have a great future. It will be affected by the federal government. It will be affected by the governor's office. It will be affected by the legislature, all of those things. But what will impact it most is you. You will make the decisions and the actions by your commitment to the Endowment Association, by your lobbying of legislators, by your continued support of this university about whether or not we will be good or whether we will be great. And I think that the challenge that we should all issue ourselves as Wichita State alums is a commitment to greatness, and I'm happy and proud to be a part of it. Thank you all very much.